Air Force veteran George Hudson is teaching kids how to code at the Turing School of Software and Design on episode 128 of Veteran on the Move.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that JOB trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
Grow your brand and business speaking directly to your ideal customers as a podcast guest. Imagine being in the ear of your ideal customer. That's what being a podcast guest can do for you and your business. Interview Valet is the concierge-level podcast guest booking service, providing the fastest way for executives, businesses, and thought leaders to maximize the benefits of podcasting. Their premium, hands-free solution takes care of everything but the speaking to reach your ideal audience with the least amount of snags or hassle. Interview Valet's all-inclusive system empowers clients with interview preparation, certified guest training, and personalized attention that ensures you, the podcast guest, the best experience in the podcast industry. Check out Interview Valet at veteranonthemove.com/valet. The top 7 paths to freedom is my free gift to you for listening to the show, featuring 7 great ways for a veteran to take their first step into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. To receive your free gift, go to veteranonthemove.com, or if you're listening on a mobile device, you can text the word veteran to 38470. George Hudson is a former U.S. Air Force sergeant turned software programmer. The military taught George leadership, organizational skills, and the importance of continuous professional training. He made the switch to computer programming to spend more time with his family and open the door for more opportunity. George launched Kids Who Code at the Turing School of Software and Design in 2015. All right, George Hudson, thanks for being here on Veteran on the Move, and we're going to talk all about coding today. So before we get to talking about that, take us back a little ways and tell us what you did in the Air Force.
All right. Well, thanks, Joe. It's nice to be here. So yeah, I started Air Force straight out of high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and so I was like, you know what, be military and at least get some money towards college and get that MGIB. So went into the Air Force and went into munitions first off. And my first base was Fairford, England. Great base, loved it there. Ended up supporting the B-52 mission during the conflict in Kosovo there. And this was from 97 to 01, my first 4 years of active. Went to Hill Air Force Base after that and ended my 4-year tour there after I figured I had enough saved up and wanted to get to college with the idea that I was going to be a physics professor when I grew up. And so got out, went to CSU, and started using that MGB up pretty quick. Ended up during my time there, ended up having some children and needed to support them, dropped out of college and started getting my first few blue collar jobs that I had. And during that time, we were doing pretty good. I bought a house, I had a really nice house in Fort Collins, Colorado. And then kind of the crash hit, and that hit everybody. And I found myself upside down in my mortgage, where I owed more than it was worth. And a lot of bad news. Ended up needing to short sale that house and was looking for other sources of income. And I was like, well, I always, enjoyed being in the military, so I'll go back to that. And went into the Guard, the Colorado Air National Guard down at Buckley Air Force Base. Signed up for 6 years and went on a couple of tours there. Went to Djibouti, which was a great experience, and also went to Korea.
Yeah, so interesting. I hear people talk about Djibouti. It's kind of the cesspool of the world, but I guess the mission that was going on there for many years and probably still is was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at because there's some really modern infrastructure being built over there due to, I'm guessing a lot due to our influence. But the reigning leaders over there are just jumping a whole bunch of steps and just putting in some really cool stuff. So there's that, and then of course there's the other level. There's almost zero in between there.
Okay, so you left active duty, you tried the school thing, went out and got the tough blue collar jobs to support the family, went back to the Guard. So what happened? How did you find your way into the world of coding?
So when I got back from Djibouti, I had had a considerable amount of money saved up, combat zone pay, stuff like that. And I knew I wanted to finish my education. My sister was actively trying to recruit me into the programming world. She really felt I'd be good at it. And I was like, I tried that. I didn't like it. It's a bunch of trolls that sit in these like caves and they hiss at people as they go by. And they laugh at the little jokes that they're typing into the computer that only they and the computer can understand. And, I was like, that's just not for me. And she's like, no, it's totally not like that. It's a lot more open now. People like communicate on a very regular basis. And she did end up convincing me that like, hey, I should try this out again. So I thought about going through the kind of the standard route. I already had a few years under my belt at CSU. And she also tried to convince me that, hey, because you need to take over so much, how about you try out one of these dev boot camps that they have and see if that's more to your liking there. So I was like, okay, I can try that out. I had the money saved up to do something like that, and it sounded pretty exciting. I researched a whole bunch. There are a lot in San Francisco, saw a few more on the East Coast, and then there is only a couple in Colorado, but one of them had a pretty good track rating already. It was called G School, led by Jeff Casimir. And so I was like, yeah, I'll try this thing out. It sounds great. And started off just as good as it sounded. And kind of partway through, I noticed I was having some trouble focusing. I was having a lot of other draws in my life, and I figured this is stress. But I found out I was getting really depressed and lethargic. And I was like, oh, I'm just not dealing with this stress well. Turns out my thyroid was shutting down and literally was not able to function very well because it had shut down so much. Didn't find that out until very late in that curriculum, and that curriculum didn't allow you to like redo or take over or anything like that. And Jeff Casimir was like, I think you're almost there. Like you struggled and you pushed through a lunch, but you're not quite like graduate level at the end of the session. And during this time, he tried to keep it hidden, but it definitely came out. There was some conflict going on between Jeff Casimir and Galvanize, the company that funded his G School operation. And basically, Galvanize wanted to make this into a business venture, and Jeff Casimir wanted to make it into an education venture. And so that fundamental difference caused them to butt heads on a lot of things. And so they kind of split ways, and I needed a little bit more support in order to kind of keep going, and didn't really have that from either side because of the split. There were some good people at Galvanize that tried, but because they hadn't taught me, they didn't really know the technical aspects I needed. And also I was really approaching the end of my runway in terms of cash flow. And so instead of being able to have more time to really develop just the few extra skills, I had to go in search of another job and ended up getting a security position. So I was still on the guard at that time. And I was going into my guard weekends, each guard weekend, while I was at G School. And that was another draw on my attention. And then shortly before I deployed to Korea, Jeff Casimir contacts me kind of out of the blue. And he's like, hey, I really felt like I could have helped you out a little bit more and you would have done a lot better now. I contractually could not do that. However, now I'm in a position where I can, and I would like to extend you the offer of invitation to come to Turing, which is now after its first year, and it's doing really well. Would you like to come? And hey, by the way, consider your tuition already paid. I was like, oh my gosh, that's a big offer for me to take on, and that was pretty flattering, actually.
Yeah, and it happens to be in Colorado where you were living, right?
That's correct. And so, also at the time, I had the Guard trying to recruit me active for full-time Guard, where I'd just be working out at Buckley Air Force Base full-time, and that's not a job to sneeze at either. And I've always just really enjoyed the guys out there. It's a great team, and so that was also on my plate at the time. And while I was in Korea, I had to make some pretty quick but also really thoughtful decisions. And I ended up choosing to go back to Turing because I really wanted something that was a little bit more mentally stimulating than what I was doing in the force. The force is great. I was munitions inspector, kind of have everything spelled out for you where all the steps are there. And that just wasn't challenging me as much as I would have liked. I understand there's other avenues that I could get challenged at, but I wanted to try this coding thing again because I had this like kind of this nagging feeling like, hey, you tried this and you didn't do that well. And I'm used to doing really well in school. And so there is kind of this almost this pride issue of like, you need to go back and do this and you need to do it right. And so I accepted Jeff's offer, and along with that, I also decided not to extend my military career. I went ahead and got out in July, which is when my term of service was up, so that I could just not have any distractions, not have any excuses on myself to not do well. Now that I had my thyroid under control and had a lot of energy and focus again. And so got out of the military and quit my security job. Again, I had a lot of money saved up from being deployed, and supporting two girls. That was kind of a really kind of scary situation to take on, because I had been at the end of my runway before I took on the security position, and was a little bit concerned from that. And so, yeah, then that's how I got in. That's how I started Turing.
Yeah. So, in what year was that happened? Because I do want to say most people would have gone for the secure job.
That's true. So that happened just last year, actually. Last year in July is when I got out of the military and started Turing.
Okay. So you're through I believe the Turing program, it looks like it's about a 7-month program. Is that correct? So you're through with that.
Yeah, it is a 7-month program. And something that Jeff learned, probably partially because of experiences with me, is that there's sometimes students that have extenuating circumstances and they do need that little bit of support. And so he has these like basically sections that he split the school into. And so that then if you don't have everything you need at the end of the section, well, you don't have to go back and take the entire 7-month course again. You go back and you just take that section again. And so it's just more of a modular approach to it. I didn't end up needing that this time. I was kind of on the fast track. Since I had some coding experience, I was able to excel, especially early on, and then help out the people that were struggling. And that kind of felt good, but I didn't feel that was enough, and wanted to give back in some other ways, which kind of leads into the kids who could.
So in your opinion, since you've done this, what's the difference between going to a traditional university computer science type degree versus one of these development boot camps or one of these coding schools? How do they differ?
Well, first and foremost, like completely different scopes. When you're going to a more traditional school, they are laying years of foundation before you even get to anything that's considered current. And there is a lot of good information there because you learn the fundamentals. You have that foundation so that when you do come across some new thing, you can apply it really well. The coding boot camps, intentionally put themselves under a big time crunch. And there's some that think they can get everything that you need in 9 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. And that's incredible to me. But they're just teaching you one skill set. And then so what Turing allows with a 7-month program is you do get some of those fundamentals that you try to get or that you do get in more traditional school, so that it just allows you to be a little bit more flexible, and they teach you a little bit bigger, broader skill set as well. I think that's probably the biggest. It's just the scope and the depth that you get.
Now, can somebody show up at the Turing School of Software and Design with little to no coding experience whatsoever, just an interest and the ability to go through the course?
Jeff Casimir actually has some good metrics on this. And I believe the last time I heard, around 60% have absolutely zero experience when they go to start his school.
Really?
Yep.
And then how does Turing decide where to emphasize? What kind of coding experience are they going to drill into these folks? I mean, because there's a whole plethora of options out there.
It's rapidly evolving. And so what Turing has done is they've built themselves, I don't want to call it a social network, it's a technical network, where they have access to a lot of people that work out in the field. And this is actually a great boon for Turing for a couple of different ways. I'd say 3 main ways. One is they get to understand, like, hey, what do these people need to know in order to actually retain a developer position at real companies that will hire them? Because one of their big things is like, we have over 90% placement rate. And that's higher even if you extend the date out for their within 6 months of graduating Turing. And so that's one of the benefits. The second benefit is that all these people they have a network with, they function as tutors for these students. A lot of these developers in the field come in, or Skype or Google Hangouts these people and mentor these students that are upcoming developers. And then the third reason is direct job placement. A lot of these contacts know exactly when a position is going to fill up, and they know what they get when they get a Turing graduate. And so it definitely works strongly for Turing in those ways, by having that huge technical network. So you're not just paying for the education, you're paying to be connected to that network.
Yeah. Now, are you having is Turing recruiting or having a lot of veterans coming through their program?
Turing kind of actively tries to get non-traditional students. They feel that it's easy enough to get a good education for the kind of a lot of Americans, but it's those people that just struggle and wouldn't have any opportunity, like vets who are like, well, I just got to do kind of what I was doing in the military for the rest of my life. And so they kind of reach out for those people. They do have help and a lot of times financial assistance for people like that. And so they kind of pride themselves on being a little bit more diversified. I did notice that I was never the only vet there at Turing. And that was actually kind of a nice feeling.
Yeah, a while back we interviewed David Molina, who started Operation Code mainly because he couldn't use his GI Bill to go to coding school, and I certainly understand that because the GI Bill wants to make sure that's a very valuable government resource. They don't want people just blowing it on the latest fly-by-night, whatever it may be. But these coding schools are certainly not fly-by-night. But as you said, it's continuously changing and evolving, almost on a daily basis. So the coding schools have to keep up with that. But your typical universities even have a hard time keeping up with it, because by the time they develop a class and have the class, a semester class, by the time the semester's over with, things have evolved and changed so much just during the course of that semester. So it's even tough for traditional universities to keep up with the day by day what's going on in the coding world. So these coding schools definitely fill a niche and a need that's out there. And we've talked before about how veterans can make great coders, because you mentioned in your bio that the military taught you a lot of great things: responsibility, leadership, continuous development. And those are the kinds of soft skills that employers are looking for. And veterans have those soft skills. It's the hard skills sometimes that the veterans may be lacking on, or they may be not current on them. And going through a quick 7-month immersion in coding school could bring them up to where they need to be on the hard skills. You match that with the veteran soft skills, and there you've got a great employee and a great coder.
Yeah, very true, Joe. And that's actually true on a couple of points. Turing kind of prides themselves on building soft skills. And that's how they're primarily competing with developers that are just coming out of a standard 4-year degree. Is those developers, they don't teach agile courses yet in most places. They're starting to understand, like, hey, the work flow is changing. And so with the military, I'd say the biggest thing that's really helped me out is communication, intercommunication with your team, parallel communication with other teams that are working on products that support yours, and just being able to keep that communication flow going, and especially having the integrity and humility to say, hey, like, I'm behind, or I don't know this, I need help, stuff like that, where a lot of developers are kind of put in these pressure situations and they like, I need to do this, and they try and do it, end up kind of failing because of that. And so definitely the military has helped me have that humility to say, hey, guys, let's take a step back here. This is beyond my training right now. If you want me to do this thing, you either need to extend out the time so that I can learn this thing myself, or, give me a little bit of assistance on it.
You mentioned the term agile courses. Is that a specific coding term, or what you guys are doing there at Turing? What do you mean by agile courses?
And so it's a buzzword for sure. And really all it means is that you are trying to get the bare minimum of what you want developed done, so that you can get that out somewhere where people can put eyes on it and kind of pick it apart and get you feedback, so that then you can apply that feedback on a very lightweight situation. And they call it agile because then you can, if you need to shift, it's a lot easier to shift. Whereas if kind of the more traditional coding, they call it waterfall effect, where basically someone at the top just says, you need to have all these features done and we're going to ship in the fall or something like that. So you have all these features that they want built. And then when the time comes to ship it, it's this really big, massive thing, and they ship it out, and then they'll receive feedback. Well, it's this big monolithic application at that point, and it's hard to shift if you need to change, or if something's not working the way you want it, or you didn't guess the crowd's reaction rate. So they call it agile because you're able to take this lightweight application and really shift as the needs of the people might change, or as the feedback you get asks you to shift.
Well, yeah, we always hear that one of the most important parts in software development or developing an app is getting out that MVP, the minimal viable product. So it sounds like you're forming the mindset in the coders there at the Turing School to produce MVPs and then shift afterwards. And that's probably key, because I never really thought about that. A lot of coders and developers might have been trained under the waterfall effect, and then they fit into somebody that wants the waterfall effect, and then when it gets released, then they've got that huge problem. Whereas in software development and application development, it does seem like getting the MVP out first and then shifting and pivoting from there is really the way to go, because you never know how it's going to be received.
Very true, Joe. Yeah, if there's a bug in your code and you deployed 50,000 lines of code, that's going to be a little bit harder to find than if you deployed, just a few hundred lines of code. But MVP is definitely a big thing in software, but that's something that's going to help any entrepreneur out there. Any of these veteran entrepreneurs could definitely work on understanding MVP, because we aren't always given that option in the military. That's definitely a skill that's not usually presented, because you have a mission and you need to satisfy that mission. And you can't be like, okay, well, we built you 2 bombs, pilots. Are these pretty good to go? They might be a little bit upset with you at that point. But in the entrepreneurial world, when you're investing your own cash, you want to get that feedback as soon as possible. You don't want to assume what the market's going to be like. You want to get that MVP out so that you're investing the minimal amount of cash and getting the maximum amount of feedback so that you can then adjust what you're building.
All right, so let's shift a little bit. Recently, you started Kids That Code, and so what are you doing with that program?
Well, that was kind of a mishmash of different ideas for me in a short time crunch, or just a limited time that I had available for that. I wanted to give back. I really felt that Jeff was giving me a great opportunity, and I wanted to find some way to give back, and he's really big on building community. I also wanted to teach my daughters some of these awesome things I was learning. When they would be looking over my shoulder while I was coding, they would be very interested, and they would start playing around, especially with the apps that were more gamey. And they'd change code around to get the effect that they wanted. I was like, hey, these kids can learn it. They're ready. And then also just because I had such limited time while I was going to Turing, working probably more than 50 hours a week at the school, and then, at least another 20, but usually quite a bit more than that. Sometimes up to another 40 hours a week in homework. So by that, I mean sleepless nights sometimes, which I don't recommend ever. But anyway, so I didn't have much time. And so I just wanted to start teaching kids. And I felt that if I opened it up to a community, then I'd be able to do all those things at once. And so started interviewing some of the teachers. A lot of the teachers that work at Turing are Teach for America veterans, and a lot of them taught elementary before they came to teach these adults. And it's interesting how much of a crossover there is in that education. So I wanted to draw on that experience, ask them about how to set up curriculum, how to keep these kids engaged, and then just started throwing some times together, asked for volunteers from other students. There's some pretty good support from that, and just had to start making decisions. I didn't really understand what a leadership role that was going to be, because I really had to kind of work around these other people who are also on tight schedules, but still get things done, which meant taking a lot of responsibility on for myself. And of course, guess what? I was an NCO in the Air Force, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. And got things rolling, and it had a nice, smooth rollout, a lot of good participation. And I tell you what, we had kids that were regulars all the way from October when it started, all the way through. They're pinging me now, like, hey, summer vacation's over. Like, when are we starting this up again? And so it's really fun and engaging and rewarding to start it up the program.
So what is it you're doing with, are you just like throwing a problem out at the kids and say, write some code to fix this problem, or you teaching them a syllabus or what?
So I use, for my coding instruction, I use Scratch, which is a language built by MIT specifically for helping teach kids to code. It kind of takes away that language barrier where you have to type these weird functions and these weird words that mean different things in different computer coding languages. And it makes it into a tile-based system. So the kids, once they learn those tiles, they know they want to grab that tile, put it in here, grab another tile, put it in there. So I wanted to get that language barrier out of the way so we could focus on the fundamentals of coding. So each day we start off with a warm-up exercise, and that's usually not a coding exercise. It's just like, hey, let's get our brains spinning. Usually that's like some sort of a riddle or a logic problem. I drew a lot on like I don't want to say crossword, but it's like a puzzle logic where you basically deduce both graphically and in your head different outcomes based on the information that you're allowed. You give these rules, and then the kids have to figure out, okay, well, can I cross something out or can I select something because of these rules that I'm given? And that's kind of also applies directly into coding, where you need to tell the computer what rules it has so it knows when to basically get rid of an option or to select an option. And then we would roll into that to more strictly class time, where I would be teaching them a specific skill. And kind of each class I had a basic foundation in mind. I started off with, hey, let's teach them animation. That's fun, and it's not terribly technical difficult. And that ended up being a really good kind of introduction to all these kids into the coding world, because it got to build some fun things on that first day. And so then after that class time, then we have like kind of free time for the kids where they get to kind of just play around, mess around, but more importantly, ask specific questions where I can give them one-on-one time, and other people that are supporting me from Turing, these other students, can give some of these others some one-on-one time, kind of spur these kids into creating something for themselves.
And are you doing this in a classroom environment, or are you doing it online remotely?
So Turing offered their location as a place for these kids to come. Another thing they offered, they have Google Chromebooks. So anyone that can't afford their own computer to bring in, hey, we can attach to the internet right there. They're offering internet. And the last thing Turing provided was they offered these kids dinner every time they came, because they were there for 2 hours, and sometimes using your mind pretty actively like that can exhaust these kids. And so they'd be hungry at the end of those 2 hours. And plus it was around dinner time. And that was kind of a fun way to kind of end the program. But what was interesting is, like, I noticed a lot of kids would like still wanting to be putting their heads down, be like, I got to finish this one thing. And before they grab like pizza or like really cool, other things, I tried to get them to eat a little bit healthier. Turing's like, yeah, we'll buy them pizza. And I was like, okay, bought them pizza a few times. And then we started moving into like a little bit healthier of a diet.
Hummus and pita chips. Yeah.
Yeah, literally like stuff like that. I always got these vegetable trays, and those ended up getting like gobbled up pretty quick. And then I usually have tried some sort of protein, lots of fruits available, stuff like that.
Well, that's cool. Well, hey, we're getting towards the end of our time, George. I wanted to dig a little bit into detail before we have to go. When somebody shows up at Turing and they want to learn how to code, like, what is some of the first classes and some of the first stuff you go through? Like, what languages? I mean, I want to geek out here and hear really what it is you're exposing them to.
All right. And are you talking about kids who code, or talking about Turing?
Well, Turing, I think, because I think he gives a pretty good idea about kids that code. But I'm curious, from the perspective of a veteran out there, or somebody who's getting ready to get out, and maybe they don't want to go to the traditional university for the first time, or go back to school if they've already been, and they're looking at a place like Turing. What is it they're going to be exposed to, and what are they going to learn from right out of the gate?
Well, even before you start your official classes, they send you some coursework, some homework to do. And the language I think they're still using is Ruby, which is a pretty good choice because it's easy to read syntactically. You can kind of get an idea of what a coder is trying to do just by reading the code, even if you don't have any background in coding experience, because it's kind of spelled out in English for you. there are some weird things, of course, and getting into the nitty gritty of it, you're going to be learning algorithms to basically build a Turing machine, which is what Turing is named after. Like within the first few weeks that you're there, you're going to be deciphering garbled text that's been encrypted using the code that you write. And you're also going to be able to find out how to encrypt a message as well at the same time. And that gets pretty hairy. Like, it's really intense right off the bat. Something I definitely recommend for veterans is really clear your calendar if you're ever planning on attending such a boot camp, because if you gotta spend 100% of your attention on it or to really succeed.
Awesome. Okay, so I would like to give you the last word, and you can put another plug in for the Turing School and even Kids That Code. But if you're speaking to that veteran out there, somebody who's getting ready to get out, or they're in transition at the moment, what would you say to them as far as from your perspective on what the world of coding would be able to offer them?
The biggest thing I think the world of coding offers is flexibility. It's one of these hip new things to be a part of, and they're trying to attract the best minds to this field. And so they get offered all sorts of interesting benefits besides just cash. That salary is definitely nice coming from blue collar, but today I get to work from home. That's how we're rolling right now. Time wise, like if I need to do something, I get up and do something because I know I can come back if I need to from home or from anywhere, a coffee shop, whatever, and continue to my job, get what I need done. And that's the big thing I think with it, is that being able to be flexible allows me to really be a family man and be really engaged in my daughter's lives right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, George. Well, thanks for being here, and it's great to hear your veteran success story and how you've transitioned into coding. And I really think coding is a great opportunity for a lot of veterans out there. Whether you end up starting your own company as an entrepreneur, or you just get into coding and maybe you've develop your own apps with the help of your team and that kind of thing. I think as far as somebody that's entrepreneurial minded, there's great opportunity there, and especially for veterans. We've talked about veterans have all these great soft skills that they've built up and experienced in the military, and they can get a little bit of coding capability. They can really put that to good use out there in the civilian sector.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. One last thing I wanted to touch on is that, you can't learn this in any school. What the military teaches you in just loads and loads of is grit. They teach you can't give up. A lot of these things, it's really hard, but if you don't give up, you're going to attain it. It doesn't matter what you end up choosing to do when you're coming out of the military. You use that grit, and people will see that. People will know, hey, maybe you don't have that skill set that I need right now, but I can tell you're going to have it really soon because you're going to keep pushing forward.
All right, George. Well said. Thanks for sharing your story. And these two veterans are Oscar Mike.
Cool. Thank you very much, Joe.
As you can tell from listening to the Veteran on the Move podcast, interviews are a great way to tell your story and spread the word about your business. If you would like to get booked as a podcast guest, I recommend Interview Valet. You can check out Interview Valet at veteranonthemove.com/valet. Be sure to check out Thrive15.com, the world's premier online education platform that helps entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs learn how to start or grow a successful business. Start your free 30-day membership by going to Thrive15.com and use the promo code VETERAN. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.